My name is Daria. I'm 57 years old. People often say that the years approaching 60 are the most peaceful time of life, when your children are grown and you can finally enjoy the fruits of what you've sown. But I wasn't that fortunate. After my husband passed away from heart disease 2 years ago, my life took a turn I never expected. The small house my husband and I owned in the suburbs was filled with memories. Every corner of every room, every chair carried traces of our youth and our laughter. But after my husband died, the house became too big, too empty. My daughter, Anna, 33 years old, urged me many times to sell the house and move in with her husband, and their 2 children so I wouldn't be lonely. "Come live with us, Mom. It'll be easier to take care of the kids, and you'll have company," Anna said, her voice full of concern. Hearing that, I thought it was a reasonable choice. And truthfully, I wanted to be closer to my grandchildren. I didn't want to remain alone in that empty house forever. I sold the house for nearly $150,000, a considerable amount for a widow like me. I contributed most of that money so that Anna and her husband, Hubert, could buy a larger home in a safer neighborhood. The house was under Anna and Hubert's names. At the time, I thought it didn't matter. They were my daughter and son-in-law, family. As long as we could live together happily, whose name was on the paperwork didn't matter to me. In the early days of living together, I tried my best to blend into Anna and Hubert's routine. Every morning I woke up early to prepare breakfast for the whole family, then took my 2 grandchildren to school. During the day, I cleaned, did laundry, and sometimes cooked hearty meals so Anna wouldn't be so tired after work. But Hubert didn't seem to notice anything I did. He was always busy with work and seemed uncomfortable with me being in his house. At first, I thought maybe Hubert just needed time to get used to it. He was a quiet man, introverted, and didn't express emotions easily. I didn't want Anna to feel stuck in the middle, so I quietly endured it, hoping that time would make things easier. But as time went by, I increasingly felt Hubert's distance. He would often show his annoyance whenever he saw me spending too much time in the kitchen or cooking dishes I liked. One time, I just wanted to bake an apple pie for the grandchildren. Hubert walked in, looked at the flour and fruit spread out on the table, then sighed and said in a cold voice, "Who's going to clean up all this mess? I don't want the house to constantly smell like food." I silently cleaned up, feeling both sad and embarrassed. I wasn't used to creating tension in the family, especially in front of Anna. As for my daughter, although she knew her husband wasn't friendly toward me, she always tried to keep the peace. "Don't mind him, Mom. That's just how he is," Anna would often say. Hearing that only made my heart heavier. I didn't want Anna to be stuck between her mother and her husband, but the hurt inside me kept growing. Hubert became less and less discreet about his discomfort. He would often bring up money in a roundabout way. Like when I bought a few extra kitchen items, he said, "You should save a little. We still have to pay off this house. We can't keep supporting someone else forever." I was speechless. It was the money from selling my house that had paid most of the down payment for this one, yet Hubert had never once mentioned that. I just pressed my lips together and gave a forced smile, not wanting to argue. In the days that followed, I noticed Hubert began locking some cabinets in the house. Even the refrigerator had a note labeling which food belonged to whom. I felt like an outsider. At night, lying on the small single bed in my little room, I often thought of my husband. If he were still alive, he would never let me live with such humiliation. One evening, when the whole family was gathered around the dinner table, Hubert seemed irritated from the start. He ate while glaring at me, his eyes cold and sharp. I kept my head down, serving food to the grandchildren, not daring to look at him directly. Suddenly, Hubert slammed his spoon onto the table and said in a voice full of anger, "You're eating without contributing anything. Do you think you still have any right here?" Then he grabbed a piece of meat in his hand and threw it straight at me. The piece of meat hit my chest, and the sauce splattered all over my shirt. I was stunned, my heart pounding wildly. My 2 grandchildren sitting next to me burst into frightened tears. Anna stammered, "Hubert, what are you doing?" but didn't dare step forward to help me. I stood up, my hands trembling, unable to believe what had just happened. I wanted to say something to defend myself, but my throat was tight. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Hubert looked at me as if I were the greatest burden of his life. That night, I sat alone in my room, wiping the stains from my shirt while thinking about Hubert's words. I had sacrificed so much so that this family could have a stable home, yet now I was treated like a stranger, humiliated in front of my grandchildren. A deep crack formed in my heart. I began to ask myself, where did I go wrong? And how much longer could I continue living like this? I couldn't sleep that night. The small, pitch-dark room felt as if it were suffocating me. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of Hubert throwing the piece of meat at me flashed vividly and painfully, as if it had just happened. I had never imagined I would be treated like this in the very house I had contributed most of the money to buy. I missed my husband terribly. If he were still alive, he would never let me endure this humiliation. But he was gone, leaving me to carry all this shame alone. I thought about our old house, the one filled with laughter. I had sold it, telling myself it was to be closer to my daughter, to have a complete home. Yet now, I felt like a lost guest in my own family. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house became heavier. Hubert didn't bother talking to me, and when he did, his words were cold, laced with contempt. Anna tried to ease the tension, but I knew she was trapped between her mother and her husband. I didn't blame Anna, but every time I saw her bow her head in silence, while Hubert insulted me, my heart ached. One afternoon, while I was folding clothes in my room, I happened to overhear Hubert talking on the phone downstairs. He didn't know I was near the staircase, so his tone was relaxed, even mocking. Yeah, as soon as she's out of the house, I'll mortgage it to get capital to start my company. She has no rights here. All the paperwork is under my name and Anna's. Getting rid of her will be easy. I was stunned. I gripped the stair railing tightly, my palms sweating. So all the disdain, all the subtle hints to drive me out had been paving the way for this plan. I wasn't just a burden in Hubert's eyes. I was an obstacle preventing him from using the house as his own asset. I returned to my room, locked the door, and cried like a child. I had sacrificed my last home to help my daughter and grandchildren have a stable place to live, and now I was about to be thrown out on the street with nothing. The feeling of helplessness rose so strongly it was suffocating. I asked myself, do I deserve to be treated this way? I thought about my grandchildren, thought about Anna, but then another question rang clearly in my mind. Who will protect me if I don't stand up for myself? That night, I opened the old cardboard boxes I still kept in the corner of my room. Inside were all the documents from selling my old house, along with the bank statements showing the money transfers directly into Anna's account when we bought the new house. I carefully laid each document on the bed, noting the dates. Each paper was proof that I had contributed to this house, that I wasn't the freeloader Hubert claimed I was. The next day, I called Mr. Walter, an old friend of my late husband. He had been a lawyer, now retired but still very experienced. I arranged to meet him at a small cafe downtown to talk. Walter listened to my story for a long time, never interrupting. When I told him about being hit with food, he sighed softly. Daria, you can't keep enduring this. I know you love your daughter and your grandchildren, but love doesn't mean letting others trample on you. You have a legal right to the money you contributed. If necessary, you can ask the court to force the sale of the house and give you the share you deserve. I was stunned, but I don't want to make a big scene. I'm afraid it will hurt Anna and the children. Walter looked at me, his gaze firm. Do you think they're not hurt already? The children have already witnessed you being humiliated in front of them. You need to show them that you have value and that no one has the right to trample on that. Silence isn't always sacrifice. Sometimes it's just a way for others to keep pushing further. You must protect yourself first. Walter's words awakened me. I had thought enduring everything was a way to keep the family together, but in truth, the more I tolerated, the more Hubert despised me. I realized there was no way back. I had to stand up. In the days that followed, I quietly prepared. I contacted the bank to request statements and gathered every piece of evidence related to the money I had contributed. I organized them into a thick folder, locked safely in a small handbag. I began to pay attention to everything Hubert did, writing down the things he said whenever he insulted or threatened me. Then I made a decision that even surprised myself. I would temporarily leave this house for a few days. Not to run away, but to protect myself, so Hubert couldn't use mental pressure to force me to sign any documents against my interests. I texted Anna, telling her I needed a few days to rest. Then I left with my folder one early morning while everyone was still asleep. I sat on the bus heading to an old close friend's house, my heart both heavy and gradually relieved. I knew I was stepping into a difficult battle, but this time I would no longer cry silently in my room. I would reclaim what was rightfully mine, not by screaming, but in the strongest and fairest way possible. I had been away from Anna and Hubert's house for nearly a week. In the first few days, I worried constantly and missed my two small grandchildren terribly. But the farther I was, the more I realized I had made the right decision to leave for a while. I no longer had to endure Hubert's harsh words every night, no longer had to live with the feeling that I was a freeloader. Instead, I now had time to think more clearly. Walter, my late husband's lawyer friend, helped me file a petition with the court to establish my rights to the house. He also drafted a letter to Hubert and Anna, stating that if they didn't reimburse me for the portion of the property I had contributed, I would request the court to force the sale of the house for division. When I signed that document, my hands trembled, but my heart was more determined than ever. 3 days later, Hubert called me. His voice was no longer arrogant like before, but filled with anger and fear. "What are you trying to pull, Daria? Why did you drag the court into family business? Do you want to tear this house apart?" I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. "Hubert, I don't want to tear anything apart. But I have a right to the money I contributed. I paid a large portion for that house, and I will not allow myself to be thrown out with nothing. If you want to settle this peacefully, meet with my lawyer." On the other end of the line, Hubert's voice turned into a growl. "Do you think you can win? The house documents don't have your name on them." I took a deep breath, then replied slowly, "You can look down on me, but the law won't. I have full bank transfer records and proof of my contributions. Do you really want to test this?" Hubert was silent for a long moment before hanging up. I knew he was panicking, and I knew the real battle had just begun. 2 days later, I received an official notice from the court summoning Hubert and Anna. That evening, Anna called me, her voice trembling. "Mom, Hubert is furious. He says you're trying to throw our whole family out on the street. Do you really want to do this?" Hearing my daughter cry made my heart ache. I wanted to hold her like when she was little, but I couldn't allow myself to be weak. I spoke to Anna, my voice gentle but firm. "My dear, I don't want anyone to end up on the street. I just want to get back what I rightfully deserve. I sold my only house to help you have this home. I can't accept being treated as a burden and pushed out with nothing. I'm doing this so that you and the children understand that we must know how to protect ourselves, no matter who it is." Anna was silent for a long time before softly saying, "I understand, Mom. I'm sorry for letting you endure all of this." The court date hadn't arrived yet, but Hubert took the initiative to meet me at the lawyer's office. He came with a young man, probably his own lawyer. I saw the hostility in Hubert's eyes, but I was no longer afraid. Walter sat beside me, opening the thick folder full of documents I had prepared. The tense exchange lasted for hours. Hubert tried to deny it, claiming the money I transferred was a gift, not a contribution toward the purchase of the house. But Walter coldly pointed out that the money had been transferred exactly at the time of purchase, and that I had ample evidence proving it was a contribution. If the case went to court, Hubert risked being forced to sell the house and divide the assets, something he clearly didn't want. In the end, Hubert was forced to back down. He agreed to reimburse me the amount corresponding to the portion of the house's value I had contributed, along with a small amount of compensation for insulting me and causing emotional distress. When he signed the settlement, he looked at me with eyes full of resentment, but I no longer cared. I left the lawyer's office with the settlement papers in hand, my steps lighter than ever. I had reclaimed what was rightfully mine, not through shouting or resentment, but with calmness and fairness. A few weeks later, I used the money I received to buy a small apartment in a peaceful town not far from Anna's house. The apartment wasn't large, but it was complete and cozy. I planted a few flower pots on the balcony and placed a wooden chair by the window so that each afternoon I could sip tea and watch the sun set. Anna occasionally brought the grandchildren to visit me. Each time, she would hug me tightly and whisper, "Mom, you're so strong. I'm proud of you." I only smiled. I didn't feel strong. I just knew I no longer wanted to live a life where I was looked down upon. That night, I wrote a sentence in my journal. We can't force others to value us, but we can stand up and protect our own worth. Silence isn't always patience. Sometimes, silence is to prepare for the right moment to fight back. I closed the journal and looked outside. A gentle breeze blew through, carrying a sense of peace I had long lost. My new life began from that moment.